Hello, everybody, and welcome to First Love. My name is Dr. Robyn Kassas, and I'm sitting with the amazing Dr. Robyn Kassas. Dr. Robyn, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
It's been a very fulfilled 2025, and we are excited for all that God is going to do in 2026. So to all our listeners, Happy New Year. We are excited to continue taking you on the journey of your first love in 2026. Speaking of that journey, we are going on from what we spoke on last week to do with the Holy of Holies coming into the Ark of the Covenant. We've been on this extremely informative and descriptive journey through the tabernacle. So, Dr. Robyn, you wanted to mention a couple of things before we move into the next part tonight, which is very ironic that it's the first of the year, first week, and we're coming into the Ark of the Covenant. I think there's no better way to start the year off.
I think I'd like to just run over some things that we mentioned last week and what the Ark of the Covenant really represents, and that, of course, once you come to that place and you've been lifted up with the balance of your emotions, you'll be in the presence of God, the immediate presence of God. And, of course, that's where you find yourself moving in your spirit. You know, the immediate presence of God. This chest is got several items in it, but we want to talk about the mercy seat tonight. We want to talk about, once you have a look at this and what is on the lid of this chest. And it's called the mercy seat, and it's called that for a reason, because on top of that mercy seat, there were the two cherubims. Remember we mentioned that, and the wings that were touching, the two angels' wings that were touching. And, of course, we know that's the voice of the Lord.
Yeah, you spoke on that last week.
Yeah, that was to Moses. And that brought him to speak right below the tip of their wings. And, of course, that was important because mouth to mouth, face to face really is important. Very important.
Very important.
So, but inside the chest there were three articles, which is what we meet when we meet God. We find the first article is the 10 Commandments. But before we go into that, I know you want to speak a bit more on the mercy seat. Why don't I hand it over to you now and you add your piece to the mercy seat?
Definitely, yeah. Before we go into the break, you were talking last week on the cherubim, and I thought that was an important thing to expound on. There's a couple more things that we need to bring out about the importance of the cherubim, their position, the way that they're facing, what they represent. And then the mercy seat has so many different nuances that we need to unpack, especially to do with how Jesus fulfilled being that mercy seat at the cross. So the cherubim also represent, the guardianship of divine order.
Definitely.
And, they are, again, it's heaven's agreement with God's mercy. So we have an angel on the left, an angel on the right. So we have the two in agreement, right? If two or more are there, and the of more there in the scripture has been added. So if two, and then it talks about heaven and earth. So this is agreement between heaven and earth for God's continual mercy to flow. Another thing that's important about the cherubim is the Lord said, there I will meet with you between the cherubim. So It's important to point out this is not above. It's not above activity. It's not above law, but it's above mercy that God meets with his people.
And of course, as we know, if there wasn't mercy, then there'd have to be judgment.
Yes, very, very true. And we'll bring that out more with the actual expounding of the mercy seat. Again, another important thing about the cherubim is that their faces were gazed inward, pointing down at the same thing. So their eyes are fixed at the same level, but they're looking at the same thing.
And that's like face to face.
Literally. And so their gaze is actually beholding the mercy of God. So they're bringing our attention and our focus to that mercy is what emanates from God's holiness, not judgment.
Thank God for the merciness of God.
Yes.
Otherwise, We'd be struck like lightning every time we came into his presence.
So this facing downward, it brings out that mercy is the focus and that God dwells where surrender creates room. That's the space. That's that tension. There's a tension between the two wings and the cherubim's wings touching in that kind of culmination. So here we see heaven is itself centered around mercy. Now, this is an important thing for the believer. Heaven is centered around mercy, not accusation.
Yes, and it also represents righteousness of God and not our righteousness, because our righteousness is as filthy rags. And so we have to come to that place and always be remembering.
Yes.
We have to go in with someone else's righteousness.
Ooh.
We cannot enter into his presence with our righteousness. And of course, we know what that means. That means the righteousness of God.
Yes.
That's the only way you could go in.
Yes, so true. And I love that you brought that out last week. You know, when we talked about the righteousness of God is attained not through action.
Yes, through attitude.
And you said something coming off last week, Dr. Robyn, that we talked about. It was off mic, but I actually wrote it down and recorded it because it was so powerful, as many of your gems are. You said that it's that way because if it was the other way around, where action produced attitude,
we'd be working at it all
it would be a work.
time.
Yeah, we would be
All the
working
time.
for righteousness. It would be our righteousness. It would not be the righteousness of Christ.
And that would be all the time working for it and at it.
So that means the righteousness of Christ comes when my attitude aligns with his attitude, which produces a right action.
Yes. If you have the right attitude, then your actions will take care of themselves.
I think we need to pause just for a second. If I had a gem button or a crispy flash button, I would press it right now. Because I think that's an important thing in 2026. There are going to be so many things that present themselves as the right actions. But we need to learn to, and I'm going to use this verbiage a lot in 2026 because it's the Vav year, we need to learn to hook into the right attitudes first before we try to hook into the right actions.
I think what I'd like to say here is we concentrate too much on action. Even in the world today, with everything that's going on, it's all about action. But if attitude isn't first, then the action is wrong.
Oh, Jesus, the Lord Almighty. This is an important thing. God is kind of setting new parameters as we go into this year on how intimacy is developed. Intimacy comes from right attitude, not right action.
That's correct.
Ooh, Jesus. And here's another important thing about this mercy seat as we go into the expounding and the full, opening it up. The mercy seat actually is where God meets humanity, but God meets humanity, it's governed by truth.
Yes.
So mercy is not governed by grace.
No, it's by the truth.
It's by truth. And I think a lot of the times we can try to govern God's mercy in our life via the grace of God.
And I think when we do that, we cause grace to become a license.
My Lord. And it's important here because in Romans 3:25, Paul actually says Christ as our, and he uses the Greek word here, halasterion, which is mercy seat. And so he's literally saying that Christ has become the mercy seat of this second, I wouldn't say old or new, I don't like using those terms, but the second covenant, the new covenant in the sense that the updated version of the covenant. In the first covenant, the mercy seat, the blood was only applied on the top from the outside. But in the second covenant, Jesus has actually applied his blood from the inside out.
And he becomes the mercy seat.
And he becomes the halasterion. He becomes the mercy seat. And I think that's an important thing for us to see, because when I say heaven is governed by mercy versus accusation, the accuser of the brethren cannot speak in heaven, because heaven is governed by mercy. Yeah. So he has to accuse from the earth.
And when you say about it's within, it's Christ within us.
Oh,
that's the only way we can receive the mercy. If it's an action, it's on the outside of us. It is not an inward thing, it's an outward thing.
Very good, very good. So this must point out something to the believer. Mercy is governed by truth, okay? And then mercy governs identity, okay? Because we're coming to that place now where those 3 articles that were placed in the actual ark, they all represent identity. We have, the tablets, the 10 Commandments, the law. We have Aaron's rod, which is the authority, right? And then we also have the jar of manna,
yes.
which is the provision.
And that I'd like to speak quickly on the jar of manna, and then maybe you could speak on the 10 Commandments. I just want to bring out a simple understanding of why they would have a jar of manna. We know what the manna was all about in the wilderness. We know all that. But it's important to know that manna was placed in there, and it's still placed there. So it's placed in there all the time. What does that mean? That means supernatural provision of God every day in our lives. That means we can have our emotions, our spiritual and our physical needs supernaturally provided every day of our life.
Wow.
When you speak to the Lord, if it's journaling, then he will speak to you all the time, speaking about needs, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Yep.
And when you know that, it'll be like waters of living waters, of springs of waters within us flowing.
Yeah, wow. And just quickly adding in some neuroscience here. When we experience the mercy of God, it actually calms that fear center in us. And it allows us to recover easier than when we first experienced life without mercy. So mercy preps us for recovery. Mercy is when you don't get what you do deserve, and grace is when you do get what you don't deserve.
Yes.
So let's go into a break and we'll come back with more on this topic.
You're listening to First Love with Dr. Robyn and Dr. Nathan Kassas. The story isn't finished yet, and neither is what Jesus wants to reveal to your heart today. Let's jump back in and pick up right where we left off.
All right, we're coming back, fresh off the press, as we like to say, and we're going to continue this conversation about these articles in the ark and their significance. So, Dr. Robyn, before we went to the break, we talked about grace being when we get what we don't deserve, and mercy being when we don't get what we do deserve.
Yes.
And how does that apply to where we are now in 2026 with what's going on outside in the world?
Well, we're having a lot of grace, I can tell you. A lot of grace.
And a lot of mercy,
Yeah, a lot of mercy, and righteous judgment is happening. And I think that, like I said before, we need to allow that which within us to do with our attitude. That will have a great bearing on mercy and grace, rather than just judgment from the outside in and through actions. Because I'm telling you, these days we are taught to go by our action, but our action never never finishes our attitude.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. And it's an important thing to understand too, that when we understand the mercy seat, I want to expound on this a little bit. Mercy actually, physiologically, what it does to the body is, I said before the break, it calms the amygdala, which is the fear center. It activates the prefrontal cortex of our brains, which includes now bringing us into discernment, and it strengthens discernment. And it brings a word, integration. So this is where integration replaces fragmentation. So judgment is actually dysregulating our nervous system, whereas mercy is integrating what God is saying into our nervous system.
So it's always into something.
Yes,
Within something.
Yes, and it's important to understand the context. You know, on the Day of Atonement, as they would go through the processional of the tabernacle, the high priest, he would sprinkle the blood on this mercy seat for a reason, because this essentially was a throne of judgment. Until the blood was applied, it was a throne of judgment. God would look down, and everyone was to give an account on the Day of Atonement for their sins and for the previous year. And by all means, God had every right to judge via, literally, his standard of holiness, everyone to death. But then he looked down and he saw the innocent blood sacrifice sprinkled on the altar of the mercy seat, and he instead turned it from a throne of judgment to a throne of mercy.
So that came to even the 10 Commandments, which came under the mercy of God.
Yes.
See, we've got to see that. We think we have to keep these laws. But God provided mercy to cover even the mistakes and the weaknesses there.
Yes, and Dr. Robyn, you just brought out exactly what I wanted to say. The law was inside the mercy seat.
That's correct.
So this is a foreshadowing of the law being written on the heart through mercy rather than through obligation and judgment.
Yes, rather than hands and feet and everything else.
So God's law is governed by his mercy. See? And that's important even for the Manna. This was provision that was governed by rest. See, when you come into an intimate place with the provider, you stop looking for provision and you start resting in the provider.
And also with that, you had the jar of manna, and it was a remembrance of what had taken place, that God had kept his word, that it was always there supernaturally being provided.
Yes.
And if they didn't have to go out and do things to cause action, they just had to believe and collect it.
Yes. And this is interesting about this manna, because inside this ark, the manna didn't need to be replaced daily.
Never.
And it never rotted.
That's right.
So this teaches us that provision comes from, well, let me rephrase. Provision that doesn't fade comes from a place of continual intimate rest in the mercy of God. So that's not looking and going, I deserve more. It's looking and going, I shouldn't even really have what I have now, but I'm so thankful that God's mercy has given me that. So now whatever he gives me, I'm thankful for. And that creates a constant flow of provision that doesn't need to be replaced or replenished. It's eternal.
But then when you come to look at their lives and the complaining and everything that they did, and as we would say, moaning and whinging and whining over everything, but yet God covered that in the representation of the jar of manna, with the mercy seat covering that, the weakness of the, Israelites.
Yeah. And before we go to the end, because I know we're coming to the end, I just want to quickly add this really, really important, interesting contrast, right? We said that blood was applied on top in the first covenant, not inside. But Jesus, when blood and water flowed, because he is the mercy seat, remember he's our halasterion, blood and water flowed from the inside out. So before blood was applied externally, covering sin temporarily, and access was still limited. But Jesus, his body was pierced and blood flowed from within. So redemption not only became external going in, it became internal going out. And so that means that the old covenant, let's use the word old, covers the ark, but the new covenant transforms the carrier.
And that's because Jesus is the mercy seat.
Yes. And you just said it, Colossians 1:27, Christ in us, the hope of glory.
Yes.
He is the one that comes inside and transforms us. So the transformation now is not just external, it's internal.
Yeah.
You know, mercy is flowing through us
Yes.
out into the world,
And that's-
not just to us.
And I think that's what we need to get a hold of. It's all inside, not outside coming in. It's inside flowing out.
Yep, so true. And so another thing that we quickly want to mention here, and I just wanted to tie it in, why the blood coming from the inside is so important, because figuratively we take that blood. Now, it's not the actual blood of Jesus, but it's a representation. We take that blood every Sunday, or whenever you take communion. We do it every Sunday. We take that blood and we ingest it. And we take the elements, you know, the body and the blood, and we say, by his stripes, I'm healed. And now we don't realize, but I like to tie in the science here, that, you know, our heart is now the ark of God's presence. So just like the blood going into the inside of the ark, that actually goes through our body and it actually produces what we call expectation. Now, when we attach expectation to a belief, it actually turns something on in our nervous system, and it causes us to have what we would call the reality of the blood through science. So let me just read a couple of things here that I think are really important, right? We are not saying that the physical molecules of Jesus' blood circulate in our veins. However, his blood secured legal, spiritual, and relational peace. When we believe that this blood is going through our body, as we do with communion, figuratively, we allow the body to exit survival mode. And we prime the body to go into recovery without resistance.
So that explains why we can say, by his stripes, we are healed.
This is it. So again, the word, we take that our bodies and we shift them from survival into what is called a regulation. And so this regulation actually shows us that as we reaffirm trust in the blood, as we release the fear of whatever might be coming against us, and we activate the hope that what we're doing through communion is literally anchor that we're anchoring our health on, it shifts the body. It doesn't replace medicine, but it supports healing by removing internal resistance to recovery.
And that brings great expectation.
Great expectation. So there, the mercy seat is heaven's, I like to tie it in, regulation center. So when we come into that mercy of God and we allow him to regulate us, he removes our resistance to recovery. Final word, Dr. Robyn, please take it away.
Well, I think that, wow, understanding that, you can reach out and step out into more healing, more wholeness, and believe that the blood covering will bring you through to great expectation of by his stripes you're healed.
Wow, so powerful. And you're going to need that. Just say no in 2026.
Yes, just say no.
Thanks for spending time with us today on First Love. If today's message spoke to you, share it with someone. And if you're looking for more teachings, visit www.torc.org. That's TORCC.org for more. We'll be back next week, same time, same truth. And as you go, don't forget, the one who loved you first is still loving you best.